You're listening to PumaPodcast.
If you've heard of AUKUS, the Quad, and its spin-off, the Squad, the growing trend of Minilaterals has reached you. These smaller alliances have captured the attention of analysts and world leaders, including President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who's joined several since taking office.
And I was thinking why they chose a Filipino to present on minilateralism, perhaps because not only because the country, if we will rely on the State of Southeast Asia survey of ICES, is considered to be one of the most open to supporting minilateral arrangements at the moment, but also the Philippines is also a member in some of these minilaterals.
But what are these partnerships, and why are there suddenly so many of them? We answer that and more in this latest episode of Teka Teka, powered by Puma Podcast. I'm Bella Perez Rubio.
So we know that these minilaterals constitute something bright and shiny for scholars and practitioners, and we all know that we're attracted to bright and shiny objects, but it has also contributed to the alphabet soup of acronyms that we have to understand, not only because they're important, but it matters greatly as ASEAN members navigate the complex and increasingly uncertain regional strategic environment.
That's foreign policy analyst Aris Arugay at a roundtable hosted by the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, or ICES. He's a visiting fellow at ICES and chairman of the Political Science Department at the University of the Philippines.
There seems to be some agreement that it's larger than bilateral arrangements, but not so big that it becomes some sort of a multilateral organization. So maybe they put it there 3 to 9 in one article that I've read, mainly because if it becomes 10 or more, then it's ASEAN already.
Some of them, like the security partnership between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, have special names like AUKUS, or the Quadrilateral of India, Australia, the United States, and Japan, simply called the Quad.
And then you have, of course, the trilateral between Japan, the Philippines, and the US. There was an attempt to come out with a smart acronym, but that has failed. So now they're more known as a trilateral.
And while minilaterals have become increasingly popular and consequential in recent years, they are by no means new.
This is not totally novel as far as ASEAN is concerned. After the terrorist attack in Marawi City in the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines actually agreed on a trilateral on maritime and naval cooperation.
But it's not just a matter of numbers. Here's what else sets them apart from larger groups like ASEAN, the European Union, and the United Nations.
In terms of nature, the increasing observation is that minilaterals are exclusive, unlike multilateral organizations, wherein, like the United Nations or regional organizations, it seeks to somehow have a wider scope or include as many as possible. They're increasingly seen as functional, so contrast that with comprehensive partnerships that are very broad in terms of scope. These functional areas are not only security but also economic. Unlike treaties and alliances, they're quite flexible.
Because of this, Professor Arugay says minilaterals are becoming more common and palatable than traditional treaties or even mutual defense agreements.
Minilaterals somehow constitute an innovation in terms of being able to address rising issues, as well as a way to organize preferences and to somehow lessen or mitigate the uncertainty and the tensions in the geopolitical environment.
We explore why President Marcos Jr. has been eager to join so many minilaterals after a quick break.
In terms of why are they being created, there's something in the external environment that invites a lot of these minilateral arrangements, That has something to do with the increasing uncertainty and volatility of the strategic environment, particularly in the Indo-Pacific. Other reasons could span from being able to secure short to medium term commitment from major powers. So in a way, minilaterals somehow could increase the cost of major powers, changing their minds and declining attention from certain agreements that have been made.
Again, that was Professor Arugay. Likely because this roundtable was focused on ASEAN, a bloc that prioritizes consensus, certain countries went unnamed. However, it's clear that he was referring to China, its aggression in the South China Sea, and its rivalry with the US.
Others also see that minilaterals defend the status quo, defend the regional-based international order. Other controversial reasons is that this is a way to contain certain rising or revisionist powers. It's seen as to deter possible assertive or aggressive moves of powers wanting to assert their sphere of influence or build one.
This explains why President Marcos has hinged so much of his foreign policy on minilaterals. The trilateral we formed with the US and Japan covers maritime security, an area where plenty of our interests converge. Further proof of how adaptable these arrangements can be is the newly formed Squad, another security alliance that includes the US and its allies, Japan, Australia, and the Philippines. It's an offshoot of the original Quad, replacing India with the Philippines, because our security interests in the Indo-Pacific are currently more aligned with the other three original members.
From the point of view of smaller states that join minilaterals, somehow if they're part of regional organizations, they see this as a possible quick fix due to perceived inefficiency and effectiveness of current institutions and mechanisms. So it's a band-aid, but at present, having a band-aid is better than exposing problems that, or at least problems that are unresolved. During the pandemic, some minilaterals were really about addressing an issue quickly that might take more time if they're going to be used in existing multilateral mechanisms.
But while more traditional treaties might be too high commitment and multilateral bodies too often hampered by the need for broad consensus, minilaterals aren't perfect replacements for either.
Now, what could be the limits or some of the downsides of minilaterals, given that they're quickly formed, relatively quicker than multilateral organizations? There's increasing uncertainty on being able to sustain commitment. A lot of these minilaterals are in the form of executive agreements not ratified by the parliaments or other institutions within the country members themselves. So therefore, a quick reversal might be possible if certain leaders, or in terms of political succession, the government of the day does not seem to be open to continuing the commitment to these minilaterals. The promise is that exits from minilaterals would be very hard given the stickiness of the national interest of countries that are joining them. But we all know that political elites hold a lot of sway in terms of being able to dictate foreign policy pendulum swings.
Donald Trump's re-election will likely serve as a test of how effective these arrangements really are. Like the Philippines, the US is one of the most frequent parties to minilaterals. When President Marcos traveled to Washington, D.C. in April to meet with US President Joe Biden and Fumio Kishida, who was Japanese Prime Minister at the time, I spoke to a foreign policy and security analyst about the newly formed minilateral. Here's what Lucio Pito III, a research fellow at the Asia-Pacific Pathways to Progress Foundation, said about the triad and how it might be affected by Donald Trump's return to the White House. How much hope should we pin on this new trilateral partnership? How viable does it seem to you? How well do you think it will sustain political changes that are outside of our control? And what can we reasonably expect now that all these promises have been made and symbolic gestures have been presented to us?
There's this word called Trump proofing. This is being done in Ukraine already, like trying to institutionalize the provision of arms and supplies to Ukraine, just to make sure that even if President Trump gets back in the White House, it will not be very easy for him to withdraw U.S. military logistical support to Ukraine to enable the country to keep on fighting Russian assault. And I think that kind of wisdom, that kind of thinking is also not lost among Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific allies. And so, by this trilateral summit, this very high profile event is a way for the Philippines probably to sustain the attention of both U.S. electorate, U.S. public, U.S. policymakers, and also that of Japan, to make sure that the commitment that were given by the current leaders of these two countries in this meeting will be sustained. Because if U.S. walked away from it, then the image, the reputation, the credibility of the U.S. as a unitary, as an actor that keeps its commitment, keeps its word, that its words will be honored regardless of domestic intramurals, domestic political changes.
That was today's episode of Teka Teka. If you enjoyed it, please share it with a friend or two on social media. Again, I'm Bella Perez Rubio. Anthony Tobias edited this episode, and our executive producer is Jill Caro. Thanks for listening.